Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations with Rudy Rivera. Today, I'm thrilled to have two distinguished guests where we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and arbitration and how they're linked together. The subject really fascinated me when I met Jean-Rémi at the Association of Corporate Counsel meeting, where for me, in the number of arbitrations I've handled, it's always been difficult to select an arbitrator. It's almost like a beauty contest. You have to call them. Before we go into the program, I want to thank everybody. We've got a Zoom audience and we have a LinkedIn audience. So please feel free to ask or text any questions. So why don't we start with you, Edgar? Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a Mexican attorney living in Switzerland, working for a Japanese tobacco company. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Thank you very much for the invitation, Rudy, Jean-Rémi. Yes, well, as you mentioned, my name is Edgar Martinez. I am a legal director at Japan Tobacco International. I am based in the headquarters, which are in Geneva, Switzerland, and I handle international dispute resolutions. I specialized in arbitration. I did my master's in international arbitration. I teach arbitration at a Mexican university, now, of course, online. And I also act as arbitrator in arbitration. So arbitration is one of my passions. And yes, you're right. I mean, the subject of how to select an arbitrator is always a tricky one. So thanks for the invite.
Oh, you're welcome. We're happy to have you. By the way, what university in Mexico do you teach? Some of my guests are from Mexico.
Panamericana University.
Panamericana, very good university, yes.
Yes, I graduated from there.
Good. Jean-Rémi, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a lawyer by training. You studied at The Hague as I did. I studied it many years ago. I studied it when the dinosaurs were still walking the earth, okay? You much later.
Sure, Rudy. And first of all, thanks for the invitation. As you can guess with my accent, I am French, living in Paris most of the time. And yeah, indeed, I used to work in The Hague because I was working as a lawyer for foreign governments, and I was representing them in interstate cases most of the time. So like a law of the sea delimitation or arbitration against foreign investors. So I really love that. But one day I decided to switch. I entered into artificial intelligence and legal research. Because I was doing my job. I really loved international law, international arbitration. I believe it's one of the tools that will help the world to be more peaceful with time. And I found a way to be more useful with what I could do. And then I convinced some people working in IT, in data science to work on this project with me. And one day I was not anymore a lawyer, more an entrepreneur. And I can tell you it's very different. The mindset that you need to have to move from lawyer to entrepreneur is like the total opposite. So it's a great journey, but it was not easy at the beginning.
Well, that's a topic for another discussion. You know, interesting, when I studied at The Hague, the law of the sea was just becoming codified as international law. Mm-hmm. So we studied the law of the sea convention. Yeah, I know all about the cannon flying 3 miles from the ocean. That's the initial 3 mile zone. So, but how did you first see the need for this type of service? So tell us a little bit about what your service is and how it works. And then Edgar and I will go into what a pain in the butt it is to select one prior to you coming onto the scene.
Sure. So when I had my first arbitration cases, I quickly realized that the most important decision that parties and counsel have to make is to choose an arbitrator. It will have a huge impact on the issue of the case. And so this process is very important. And we can probably distinguish 3 steps during this process. First, you need to find some candidates. And of course, you have a network because as an arbitration lawyer, you are very good at building a network. But this network is limited, and sometimes you need some people very specific. So finding some candidates is complicated. Then you have to choose. You have to enter in the mind of the person to imagine the interaction between the different arbitrators in the tribunal. And this choice is very complicated. You need a lot of information about this arbitrator. And third, you need to make sure that there is no potential conflict of interest between arbitrators, with counsel, with parties. And so it takes a lot of time. And the way we are working is very, I mean, the only information is to give some phone call to ask feedback to people who have worked with these people. And this is a very important source of information. It will stay like that. But when you have a data mind, you quickly understand that there is some possibilities to help this decision-making process. And that's how the idea of Jus Mundi started. So we started to collect information in arbitration. And first, everyone told us, you know, it's confidential, so you won't find anything. Well, it's true and not totally true, because, for instance, when you go to enforcement or to set aside an award, you have to produce the award, so it becomes public. And we've been able to, for the most recent years, to identify between 10 to 15% of the commercial arbitration award. So it's already a lot of information, plus other sources that we can discuss after. And with all of that, we could build the first database on arbitration, especially on arbitrators. So on Jus Mundi, you can look for potential candidates, you can see their track record, what they did in the past, analytics, and it helps to choose the right person.
Well, Edgar, though, but historically, when you and I have worked on arbitrations, it's a big pain, isn't it, to find somebody? Because, well, tell us your process, and I'll tell you my process. It's not an easy process, right?
No, I agree. I mean, it's always, as you're saying, a pain point, but it's also very interesting because it gets you already in the mindset of the strategy, you know? So, yes, I mean, I agree with Jean-Rémi. I mean, you read in many books and articles that arbitration is only as good as the arbitrator. And then you're thinking that, well, it might be exaggerated or not, but then you leave an arbitration and you say like, yes, it is. No, the actual flow of the process is super important. Of course, you want to ensure that an arbitrator is always independent, impartial, neutral, as all the theory says, no? And of course, you need that for purpose of enforcement, etc. But I mean, for me, at least from the standpoint of an in-house counsel, I would have two additional things apart from the traditional analysis, no? Which is, first, you want to avoid surprises. And second, you want to aim at a smooth process. Because, I mean, having surprises with the arbitrator or having some disruption during the process changes everything. No, it increases the legal fees. It increases the internal reporting. So, you know, you also have to deal internally with the case before stakeholders, the business people. So, I mean, having a smooth process also helps you internally to manage your internal stakeholders. So, I mean, I don't know if you want, Rudy, for me to tell you what I do step by step, or if you want to.
Well, we'll get into that,
Yeah.
but let me just point my frustration with it is that when you're interviewing people, normally what I've done is I've called law firms I know and say, who do you know is a good arbitrator? You talk to them, you have a conversation, you look at their webpage, maybe you've got some decisions. But at the end of the day, you don't really know what you're getting. And I think, I mean, people who are listening to this may disagree with me, but one of, I think, the flaws to international arbitration, it becomes a beauty contest. Okay, who do you like the best, but who may not necessarily be the best, okay? Now, there are groups like AAA and JAM and all these other people that will do some screening for you, okay? But at the end of the day, you don't really get into the mind of the arbitrator, right? Until you've read his decisions, which is what you do in LexisNexis. You look up a judge, you see all the decisions he's done. There are Supreme Court scholars that know every Supreme Court case, and they can tell you how they think the justices are going to rule. But that's not available until, you know, Jus Mundi came along. That's not available really for guys like us who were working in this deal. I mean, Jean-Rémi, did you see any other tool? I mean, this is the only tool I've ever seen.
No, surely Jus Mundi is the first tool that exists in arbitration. That's why it has been adopted by so many law firms and in-house teams in the past 3 years. And it's a good comparison that you do with the court judgments. But when you think of it, choosing the right arbitrator is even more important than choosing your judge, and you have more impact on this choice. So that's at the heart of the decision and the strategy. I agree with Edgar. Is the strategy also that you build globally that will be affected by that. So getting data is really crucial. And now, if you consider, for instance, construction arbitration, especially from the US, like we have most of the arbitration awards that we're able to find. So it's really a game changer.
Well, here's how I think it's a game changer is if you're going to have a judge who just does what he feels like, an arbitrator who does what he feels like it, and he knows his opinions are going to be followed, he's going to have to exercise more care in rendering the opinion.
So really, like very interestingly, one critic that I've heard about Jus Mundi is that, well, you know, if the award might be accessible, it means that arbitrators will have to write the award correctly. I mean, that should be automatic because parties need, in any case, to accept the decision. It's very important. So the arbitrators have to make this good decision by writing, and it doesn't take months to do it.
Exactly. Edgar, you talked about this process. I have a process too, but tell us about yours.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
Before this software came in, I mean, what was the process you went through to find one?
Yes. Well, I run actually two processes in parallel. So when I get the case, I contact, of course, external counsel and ask them to make proposal. No, so they always come back with a list. But I do my search in parallel, and I like to see how much does it match. No? So if I'm my research that I do, and you're right, Jean-Rémi. I mean, I think the tool that I use the most is the telephone, definitely. I call friends and colleagues and say, I mean, what do you think about this arbitrator? No? Of course, I mean, every time that you're in a dispute, you want to win, right? But that's probably not the most important. I mean, I think what you want is that the arbitrator is a reasonable person, that it's, again, not going to bring you surprises, and that it's going to guarantee that the process runs smoothly. So, I mean, we always make a case assessment, right? You know, so we know what our weaknesses and we know mistakes that we make and the strengths of our case. So you don't necessarily want an arbitrator that tells you you're going to win, right? But you want someone that you know that they are going to structure the decision properly, and it's not going to come with a decision that it's completely unsupported or it doesn't go in line with all the file that you have. So that's why you need, no? So then that's what I ask. I pick up the phone and call my friends, and as Jean-Rémi is saying, the network that you have built through the years, and say, like, have you had this arbitrator? When you receive the award, were you absolutely shocked by the by the decision? No? I mean, how was the arbitrator in the conduct of the process? Because the rest, as I mentioned, it's a given. No? You need to know that it's independent, impartial, neutral, etc. That's a given. But this is an additional process on how to select. And for us in Japan Tobacco, we have a very small and humble database. It's really, really humble and small. So from cases from the previous years, lawyers that have acted as arbitrators in our cases, and I tend to ask the lawyers that were there to give a brief opinion of the arbitrator. No? I mean, what do they think? Like kind of these reviews that you make with the products that you buy. I mean, of course it's not a product, but someone that tells you, no, I like them. They were very responsive. The decision was fair. We didn't have surprises during the process. And then yes, or sometimes, you know, that you have the opposite, no? So we also know that. No? It's yeah, we compare with the law firm.
Well, something I want to make sure our audience is aware of. I've been a lawyer for 40 years, probably longer than both of you two combined, okay? And I always know it. I've won cases I should have lost and lost cases I should have won. That's happened to anybody who's a lawyer. A good friend of mine in St. Louis is a criminal defense lawyer. He says he's never lost a case. His clients don't always do so well, but he says, I get to go home, so I never lose. But when you lose a case or you win a case, you generally know why, okay? And I think with some of these arbitral awards, you look at them and you think, oh my God, how could this decision be made? You know, one of the famous cases is Toys R Us, you know. Anyone's interested, I can give them the case, but like the arbitrator makes an off-the-wall award, numbers or profits are off. But, you know, that's the uncertainty. You know what I'm saying? Is you're likely to, I mean, you can be surprised by a judge, but now you're going to pick the person who surprises you. And there was no way to really go into his mind, you know, that's the thing. Jean-Rémi, tell us how your software, if I'm going to go to you and say, okay, I've got this arbitration pending. I'm looking for one. These are some names that have given to me. Tell me what's going to happen next.
Sure, Rudy, and what to say, both of you is very interesting, and I will jump on that. So first, what people will do on Jus Mundi, and they will go to our directories that we call Jus Connect, and they will look directly for the person. And you will have the profile with all the track record, all the cases, who this person worked with, so you can give phone call if you need, see who were the companies also involved in these cases. And you will have analytics on these decisions that help you to understand the profile of this person. So first is understanding if this person is well suited for your case. And second is going deep in this list of cases to see the other participant, to review the awards, and to go deep. And this part is surely the most interesting. You can use the search engine and go into details. And for instance, if you know that force majeure will be crucial in your case, you can see if this person, this arbitrator, already had cases discussing force majeure and how it was decided in these specific cases. So that's the most powerful part of it. And so the two types of information that you will need on Jus Connect is first, all these cases, who were the participants, so you can see if this person is reliable or not, if this person is not too busy also, which can be an important aspect. And second is really reading the documents to make your mind. And maybe we'll discuss a bit more artificial intelligence. What we provide is not, this is the best arbitrator for your case, but this is all the information that as a lawyer, as a in-house counsel, you need to review. And you will go directly to the most interesting part, but you need to review that to make your own analysis of who will be the best person, because this choice is so complex, so human, that you need to do it yourself.
I agree with that. The decision is really up to Edgar and me. You know, historically, we've had to call outside counsel, we've had to call our contacts, and even then, we're not sure what we're getting, because I've been in situations where this is the arbitrator who's the most respected in the country, and he turns out to be an idiot. Okay. And then, you know, the people who are supposedly really, really, really good, it takes a while to get on their calendar sometimes. Okay. And so I think your database opens up a whole list of other types of people, in a sense, makes the playing field. Like, you know, one arbitrator may be so busy that you can't get on his calendar, but through your database, we can go through and find maybe others who are comparable, right? I mean, and I want to clear up two things, by the way. This is not a sponsored conversation. This is something I asked you to do because I thought it was very interesting. So, so we're here for that reason, okay? This isn't a Jus Mundi commercial, but I felt that the topic was important enough that it deserves some exposure for guys like me and Edgar who practice in that area, and is a useful tool. The second point I want to make is that we're not saying that we want to win the cases, okay? We just want to know, well, of course we do, but we're saying we want to know the mindset, and that's the key thing, right, Edgar? Wouldn't you agree with that? You just want to know the guy's mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, sometimes you have cases that you believe are super strong, or vice versa. No? So like, yeah, we made some commercial mistakes and it's not very strong, no? But you want to know that you will have someone that will analyze things and will solve fairly, no? And as you were saying, I mean, sometimes you should know when you win why you won, and when you lose why you lost, no? But it's but sometimes the decisions can be shocking, so that's what you want to avoid, no? I always tell my external counsel and colleagues in arbitration, no? Yeah, I mean, the process is fascinating and you are the expert, but then you're not the one who has to sit down with the general manager and explain that to him, no, for commercially, and tell him, this is the structure, this is the case, and this person decided something that is like absolutely unsupported, no? You want to avoid that. That's why what I'm saying, you want to avoid surprises. So if you have at least as you were saying, a database that allows you to also call people, tell, did you have surprises with like bad surprises with this? And they tell you, yes, you know, they render an award like that was crazy. I mean, I would tend to not go with that arbitrator. Huh?
You know, I'm laughing, Edgar, because you bring up a really good point, okay? And that is, when we have to report to the GC to say why we lost the case, in an arbitration, the first thing they're going to ask is, how did you choose this guy?
Yes.
How did you find him? And it's a lot easier to say that we read his opinions. We thought that he was competent, number one. We thought that the way he decided cases, even thought he might lean our way based on the way he decided other cases. But it gives you ammunition with your manager and your GC. And that's really the key. But if you say, oh, well, the lawyer I know in New York picked him, well, that reflects badly on the lawyer in New York, because you're looking at the lawyer in New York, say, how did you find this person?
Absolutely.
Right.
No, and it's always a question that comes directly. I mean, we lost. Why? Who made the decision? Why did we pick it? I mean, it's like in three direct sentences. No, in less than 1 minute, you reach to that discussion.
I know. In less than 1 minute, you know if you have a job, right?
And I mean, when you think of it, like the impact of an arbitration can be so huge for a business. And if there is information available, like awards rendered by this person, and you don't read them before to appoint an arbitrator, it's almost a professional mistake at a point, because it is available somewhere. So you have to check everything that will help you to know if this person is competent or not for your case. So we're not there yet, but with the information becoming mainstream, it's something that you have to do to make sure you will choose the right person or the best.
I will go a little bit. Sorry, Ruby.
No, go ahead, Edgar. Go ahead.
No, I will go a little bit cautious on that, Jean-Rémi, because, for example, if I get to know and I have 5 candidates and I see the awards of 5 candidates, and then I only have 30 days to choose external counsel, to convince internally and make that analysis, we will need your tool to digest it more.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. You know, the thing that this activity was very time consuming before. If you just take conflict check, for instance, like you have 5 potential presidents, you need to make a conflict check against each of the 2 arbitrators, against the 2 counsel, against the 2 parties. And before, to cross-check the connections, it was taking days of work for each conflict check. Now, on the Jus Mundi, you do that basically in 10 seconds. So it's really reducing a lot the cost to do the conflict check. And so it makes it more available to everyone, because what we heard before is that, oh, I had a budget of 50K for my conflict check, so I did only this aspect. So now for anyone having a little budget for a conflict check, it will allow all parties to have the same weapons to do it correctly.
Well, I think this also will keep arbitrators honest, in the sense, if they know that their awards are going to be read by everybody. I think because, you know, when you were talking, Edgar, about the conflict of interest, you know, conflict of interest, for example, in Mexico is a little different than conflict of interest in the United States. So you have to be careful how you ask that question. And if you say to a Mexican, and I've had this happen, a Mexican counsel, do you have a conflict of interest? No, there's no conflict. Well, have you represented the other side? Oh, yes, but there's no conflict. Okay. One of the things that I think the search tool will allow you to do is determine if there is a conflict of interest. You know, I was asked to be an arbitrator on a reinsurance case, but you know, there was definitely, I said, no, we have a conflict. I can't do it, you know, but some people may say, oh, no, I can still make a fair decision, you know. And well, yeah, Edgar, go ahead.
Yeah, no, in that regard, Rudy, I am the definition or the threshold that I like the most personally. It's the one that is given by the IBA guidelines on conflict of interest. This international instrument that was issued by the International Bar Association tells you that the threshold is reasonable doubts on the mind of the parties. So the threshold is super low. So I mean, I think it's good, because you're right. I mean, there might not be a conflict of interest, but then if you know that they are quite close and they, you know, have been arbitrators many times and appointed and counsel, you start feeling, you know, not comfortable, no? Even if there is not a true conflict of interest, no?
Yeah, it's a good point. And you know, when we developed our tool, the conflict check, so most of the product people at Jus Mundi are former arbitration lawyers. So you can imagine we had endless discussions about what is the level of relationship that we should consider worthwhile to be given to our clients. And after many discussions, we arrived at the conclusion that we need to give a very broad definition to what we call relationships between people. And then each party, each counsel, according to its own culture and its own interpretation, will go through it and decide what is a potential conflict or not. But for sure, it will be different according to the regions. Yeah. And sometimes it's not a conflict, but you want to know about it because you know it can affect the decision making. Like it's a very human decision at the end of the day. I've been a secretary of arbitral tribunals, and when you see the interactions between the arbitrators that will lead to certain decisions, you understand that it's very human, and people will influence each other's in the good or the bad way. But it's very specific.
Well, Jean-Rémi, where do you gather this information? I mean, there's a ton of it and in multiple places. And I see online that you're constantly making agreements with entities and organizations. I see it on your LinkedIn. Where are you getting this?
So that's the key question. We have two main sources. The first one is to collect awards that became public through set-aside or enforcement proceedings all over the world. That's 90% of the content that we get in terms of awards. And to do that, we did a partnership, especially with the International Bar Association that Edgar just mentioned. So we created a collaborative network of lawyers all over the world who go to the court to identify the awards that become public by the court, and that sends us to Jus Mundi, and after we process with artificial intelligence to extract the relevant information from the award. So that's the first source. And in that case, the awards that you find on Jus Mundi are fully available awards, like everything is available, all the information about parties, etc. Then the second source is to provide services to arbitral centers to help them to do anonymous version of the award that they can publish with parties agreement. So the first that we did was with ICC, the main arbitral center in the world, but we did one with AAA ICDR in the US, one recently with the Cámara de Arbitraje de Mexico, also several in Brazil. And in that case, the awards will be redacted. So you won't find for sure any information about witnesses, but also any information that will lead to the identification of parties. But you will know the name of the arbitrators, and it will help you to know if they granted a good award or not. So we use these two sources to create progressively a database that will be more and more comprehensive over time in commercial arbitration.
Well, your software is not going to replace the arbitrator, but it's going to give you tools. Although this article I mentioned earlier does say eventually hint at that, maybe even machines with the correct algorithms can make a potential decision, and that could be a situation for a mock arbitration, right? If you have enough AI in, like you have mock juries, we do mock arbitrations, we do mock oral arguments. That might be a way is to have mock, pretend, but when I say mock, pretend, arbitrations to make sure that your evidence is being presented properly. What's the issue that somebody's going to hang on to, I can see that down the road,
I mean, like I was telling you already, I think we can ask anything or anyone to make a decision. We can just flip a coin and decide that this will be the issue of the case. The question is, who do we want to make a decision? And we can build an algorithm today that will make a decision in arbitration, but the decision will be bad for most of the cases because the complexity of the case, artificial intelligence is not made for that at the moment. Even if you have more data, it won't be possible. And so I don't believe that's something we'll see in the short term. In the long term, of course, we never know what can be created, but I believe it will be more a matter of a choice than a matter of technology.
Well, I think we'll see what happens 100 years down the road when we're all gone, because nobody thought we'd get on the moon. Anything that's been in science fiction movies has come true in some form or another, most things, So I think, and I remember 10, 15 years ago, a lawyer I know in Brazil was getting into artificial intelligence, and he thought it was going to be the next best thing, Can you tell us what is artificial intelligence? Because people think of it as like HAL and, you know, the computer and the original sci-fi movie. What was that movie? 2000 Space Odyssey. That it's a robot that talks to you and can think. But for our purposes, what is artificial intelligence?
So the way I would describe it is that it's the capacity to use algorithm and data to reach some decisions or to reproduce processes by reproducing the way the human mind is working. So the former way for us, for instance, to process data was to create rules and to ask the machine to follow these rules to achieve a result, okay? When you start using artificial intelligence, you just put the data with its interpretation, and you just run an algorithm to ask the machine to reach the same result without giving any rules. So that's the major difference between computation and between machine learning. And at Jus Mundi, we use it mainly to process the data. So one example I was giving you is we created an algorithm to interconnect all the awards, because if an award is referred by other award, it means that probably this award is more valuable for X or X reason. And so by just creating connections between awards, we can have an algorithm doing more and identifying some references that we didn't even find ourselves between these documents. So that's the way I think artificial intelligence can be helpful for now, is to help to process the data, because it's very complex document coming from all over the world. And so doing it manually, it's too complicated.
And it's large amounts of data. I remember when I had my first computer that had 10 megabytes of hard drive. And I thought, I'm going to need more than that. Edgar, I'm going to shoot this question to you, but it's based on a comment we got from somebody. Jus Mundi Conflict Check is an amazing tool. It helps a lot, even though here in Brazil, we don't have a significant number of non-confidential information being disclosed, right? How helpful have you found the conflict check tool?
Well, I mean, I telling Jean-Rémi and his team that, I mean, I've been recently getting to know the tool. I mean, I knew it existed, but like using it very recently. And I mean, what I found there, it's amazing. I mean, but as Jean-Rémi saying, and sorry, Jean-Rémi, it's just, I take it as a reference and I keep doing it the old fashioned. Also, I keep making the phone calls, I keep asking, because I mean, the tool, it gives you the information very quickly, but I mean, I think you still need to process it still. I know that you're getting there, Jean-Rémi, but.
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day. This is a process that has to be integrated throughout the whole process. You know, I think it's new, it's exciting, but it's like when Lexis first came out. You know, I worked at the law library in 1970 something, and the Lexis terminal was just a dumb terminal where you had Boolean searches. You know, now you can get it on your iPhone. Westlaw the same way too. So yeah, I think this is like a process that you're still going to have to use the technology, but you're still going to have to rely on your gut, Edgar. You know,
absolutely.
And at the end of the day, you know, Jus Mundi may tell me that these three people are like the best, but I'm still going to go with my gut, right?
Yeah, I agree. For now, like it's also very important to do your own analysis on the side. It's just one example. One thing that we don't take into account yet into the conflict check, that the relationship, the corporate relationship. So this person might have worked for company X, and company X is part of company Y, and we don't take this relationship into account yet into the conflict check. So there are still developments that we have in mind, that we are working on to make it even more comprehensive. And for the conflict check, I believe at a point we can become like enough. For other decisions, like really choosing the perfect person, now it will stay a qualitative analysis. And maybe just one point on Brazil. So we entered quite recently in Brazil. We started to collect more information like 3-4 months ago. And actually, we are pretty amazed by the quantity of information that we're able to find, because, for instance, all the cases against public entities, like public companies, they have to be published. And it's quite recent. And not everything is published totally perfectly at the moment, but it's moving forward very well. And so Brazil is one of the markets that we believe is super interesting, because there are many people doing arbitration and more data available with time, and we will help to make it available.
Well, Camila, so there you heard it straight from the horse's mouth. You know, expect more good things in Brazil. We have another question. Who integrated the Jus Mundi team? What profile do the people who work in the creation of the database, and who analyzes the awards in the process?
So I used to say that Jus Mundi is a legal tech company, which means that half of the team is tech, and almost the other half of the team is made of former lawyers. And so most of the people who work on the product are former arbitration lawyers. I think we have more than 20 today. And also very important people from all over the world, because we collect information from all over the world. And so we have already more than 33 nationalities in the company, which was more than the number of teams for the World Cup. So we want to keep it like that.
We have another question, but I wanted to kind of keep the train of thought with Edgar on this, what we talked about. So Edgar, do you have your list, a list? I don't know if that you want to disclose it, okay? But the questions you would ask an arbitrator. In other words, let's just say that you've gotten the information from Jus Mundi and you've narrowed it down. And I know you're still like me, you're going to follow your gut, right? Yeah. But do you have a patent list of questions that you're going to ask in every case, and how deep do you go?
Yes, we follow. I mean, we, of course, never to the substance of the case. No, you want to know about process. No, how would they react? So, I mean, the questions that I ask the arbitrator are quite, actually, I think they're going to be very obvious for the audience. It's, I mean, are you available? Have you had experience in distribution agreement cases? You don't need to tell me what you resolve, because you don't want to put them as well in the spot, no? But
well, I think it's unethical to ask them that, right? It's unethical to say, how are you going to rule, right?
Yeah. No, of course not. You cannot do that. But I mean, you are interested. I mean, do you have experience, for example, being an arbitrator in this region of the world? Because sometimes, I mean, it also differs. No, you can have a distribution dispute in Latin America. It's not the same as a distribution dispute in the Middle East. No? So the cultural background, how the people document the case, etc., it's very different, no? So you're interested in knowing whether they have this cultural sensibility. So this is where I focus the questions. But normally, I mean, I would refer the process of the interview to external counsel. I'm always very attentive, always follow up the conversations, but I try to, also, I need to know that my lawyers are comfortable with the decision. No? It's, again, I don't want surprises. No, the less surprises in the road, the better. So I mean, this is something that also commercial people ask all the time. I mean, you're already in a dispute and you want to resolve the content or the substantive part of the dispute. And then you enter into an arbitration, and then you start discussing whether the arbitrator was independent or impartial, or they knew each other. And then, you add layers of discussion to the case. You don't want that. No, you want it to keep it as smooth and as possible. Because also, the more that you discuss, the legal fees go to the roof as well. So you need to take care of the budget.
Well, we've got a question from our LinkedIn audience, okay, that says, AI has a problem with the inferences that should be drawn, let alone sample size, right? I mean, the higher the sample, the better the outcome, right?
Yes, the size of the sample is important, but also you have to put it in a balance with the complexity of the information that you want to extract, or the diversity of the information. And for arbitration, it's complicated for both reasons. Like the quantity of information is becoming more and more important, but stays low if you compare to US case law on employment matters, for instance. And the complexity is much higher. You have to consider so many things. Like if you see a construction contract, and a lot of the answer is about conviction. Like as an arbitrator, you will listen to witnesses and you will make a decision, because at the point you will be convinced by this person and not another person. And this, I don't think it's something that a machine can do in the short term.
Well, I think what I understand the question to be is that, you have to really build the big database, right? And right now the database is in its infancy, but it's still good to have, right? Oracle had to start somewhere, right? Jus Mundi has to start somewhere. But I think for guys like me and Edgar, who are like, we're in the thick of the battle most of the time, these are tools that I think are really going to help us. We've got another question that says, does Jus Mundi cover arbitration seated in the Middle East?
So that's a question that we often get because there are more and more arbitration in the Middle East, especially in construction disputes. And yes, indeed, we cover it. We recently did a partnership with the Saudi Center for Commercial Arbitration to publish some of their redacted awards, and we've been actively looking for data in the region. So it's not the easiest region for us. It's not the region in which we have the most quantity of data, but it's growing. It's growing fast, and we have a lot of requests on it. And with this partnership, it will help. So both arbitration in English and in Arabic, which is good for users and complicated for the data science team.
I would say it would be complicated to have them and translate them, but I don't know, with virtual translations now, using AI to translate, it's probably more difficult because the alphabet's different, right?
Yeah, but so we don't do any translation because our own opinion is that with automatic translation now, you get a big part of the value of the translation, at least enough to understand, and then you will go to a professional translation. So what we do is that we teach our search engine to understand many languages. So when you search a legal concept in English, you will be able to find relevant awards in Arabic, for instance, and you will find the specific part of this relevant award. And then you will use automatic translation tools to work with this award.
Well, and Edgar, when you are working on arbitration, obviously you probably do very little in the way of ad hoc arbitrations, right?
Yeah,
most of them are affiliated with, some type of entity. What are some of the entities you work most with arbitrations?
Well, we try to, since we operate in the whole world, we try to give a diversity. Of course, we work with the ICC, but we also work with local institutions, for example, in Brazil. We have worked with local institutions in Asia. But I mean, it's a good question, and that is, I think, really, it's a subject for another talk.
Another web, yeah, because, definitely.
But yeah, we try to diversify. I mean, we're not married with a single institution. Of course, we like some institutions for some regions because we want to avoid surprises and we want to know the budget in advance. It's very important from the in-house perspective.
Well, but I think it's very important to pick the right organization. Because what you have is a situation where the arbitral award needs to be enforced. Absolutely. Right? What entity has the best credentials, let's say, with the country you're trying to enforce the arbitral award in, right? So not only do you get into the problem of selecting the arbitrator, but which entity that will provide the arbitrator that will basically be the conduit, the basically sitting as the court clerk, okay? To do that, that's also another important question, right? Absolutely. I mean, many people write AAA into a contract. Many people write the ICC, and you have to know that ahead of time when you're drafting the contract, right? So do you work with your business units in the contract formation to say, hey, is this organization, without naming them, we want to stay away from? This one, these are the ones we can select. Contract attorneys, feel free to select any one of these.
Yes, I work as well. Part of my job description is work with my colleagues that draft the contract. And when they are discussing the dispute resolution clause, I do make the analysis. As you can imagine, I mean, I'm only involved in the higher, more complex contracts because, I mean, getting involved in every contract that the company does in the whole world is just impossible, for purpose of time and resources. But I mean, I'm normally involved when this is an international contract. So meaning either headquarters entity, it's going to be entering into a contract with a local distributors then I get involved. If it's local, only the local entity with a local supplier, normally I don't get involved. But of course, I normally try to be available to my legal colleagues all over the world, we act as a one team in JTI. So we're a verticalized function, which means we all report to the general counsel. And they know that I know about arbitration, so I get the telephone calls or emails once in a while, say like, I'm thinking of this clause, what do you think? No? So yes, I try to give them advice.
I get that quite a bit. I've even seen things like non-binding arbitration, you know, or I get asked, well, they want to litigate in Prague. What do you think about litigating in Prague? Well, I love Prague. I love to go to Prague, but it's not a good idea to litigate in Prague when you're a U.S. company because the loser pays cost, right? And yeah, so that's very important too. So Jean-Rémi, for how would Jus Mundi help even before you get into the dispute? Is there some type of database that, you know, these contract lawyers are looking for and say, well, we want to arbitrate, but do you also keep information on the organizations that do the work?
Yeah, actually, we do the same for organization as we do for an arbitrator, for instance. So and we developed it more because the In-House Counsel asked us, because lawyers are less involved in contract drafting, arbitration lawyers especially. But when you are in-house, you are working on your contract, you probably have your policy, like we use ICC and AAA, for instance, depending on the region. But then you have a counterparty that will ask something else. And maybe you've never heard of this arbitral institution, and you wonder if this is a good choice or not. So what we do is that we build analytics on each of these institutions, so you can know in which industries are used the most, what are the type of parties that use this institution, what are the law firms that use them, so you can also ask some feedback, and it helps you to make the choice at the contract drafting stage.
Well, and some entities will screen their arbitrators well, others won't. You know, I found that, you know, I've worked with AAA, I've worked with JAM, and their arbitrators seem to be pretty well screened. In other words, you're not going to get some, as I like to use the word idiot with arbitration, but you're not going to get some idiot, you know, on there because it's been screened. So I think that part is valuable. So there is a lot to be said for, you know, sticking through, you know, organizations, because ultimately you have to look to where the award's going to be enforced and which organization you pick. So you're providing database for that. You're providing information that when the contract lawyers are looking at it and somebody suggests AAA, they suggest ICC, they suggest some other group, you're able to give them information as to which not would be better, but give them data for which they can make the decision.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And we also collect enforcement decisions. So you can look at how these cases have been enforced in several jurisdictions. For now, we don't do yet statistics of enforcement per jurisdiction, but without telling you a secret, that's one of the projects we are working on.
That's down the road, right? That's down the road. Well, I can see your company really going to grow because I think there is a big need for it. I mean, one of the things that I see that's a problem in the international area is the lack of really available data. Okay. You can get on Lexis and Westlaw and get law on pretty much anything, secondary sources, but, you know, wanting to find law in Mexico, I'm sure some of it's online. I've seen some of it online, but there's very limited, really, for us to see, especially in civil law countries where there's no precedent setting. You know, that's when you're really, you know, an American expression, buying a pig in a poke. You don't know what you're getting in the bag.
And actually, already, if you look a bit at the legal tech ecosystem around the world, there are companies, a bit like Jus Mundi, in many jurisdictions that are making this effort to collect the information, making it more available. I know some in Brazil, some in France, in the US as well. And so there is a global movement all over the world to collect information, make it available, process it with artificial intelligence. And so the specificity of Jus Mundi is to doing for arbitration at the international level also. But clearly the landscape in 10 years will be so different from what it is today or what it was 5 years ago.
Well, when I started doing research, we had to go to the library and get the books. And then sometimes people, believe it or not, would hide the books because they didn't want anyone else to do well on the paper. Edgar, as a side question, though, I mean, being a Mexican lawyer working in Geneva, you've got your perspective because you've been educated as a Mexican lawyer, right? I've got my perspective because I've been educated as a U.S. lawyer. And, you know, although I've 30 years, I've worked in Mexico and Latin America, so I got the mindset for that too. But how do you feel that your mindset has helped you in the arbitration world? Because you're arbitrating all over the world, not just Mexico, right?
Yes, that's correct. Well, I mean, I like to think of me as an international lawyer. This is the subject that I loved when I was studying at university. I'm also qualified to practice law in France, and I did a master's in international arbitration in Stockholm University. So, I mean, what it's more passionate about for me, it's when I get into a case, the first thing that I want to know is the cultural part. So I start speaking to, for example, if we are having a dispute, let's say that we were mentioning the Middle East, I will call the general managers or my legal colleagues there and start asking questions. How do you do business there? So it's is it something that you just go and have dinner, or it's more formal? How do you introduce yourself? So for me, I'm a passionate of learning this culture. And this is something that a position like I have right now in Japan Tobacco, it's like giving me with a lot of abundance, no? Being able to do that. But I mean, how has it influenced me? I mean, of course, I'm originally a civil lawyer. So yes, I have, sometimes it's hard, no? So you need to, you have your learning curve, and you need to have an open mind all the time. I think that's one of my mottos.
Well, and the culture is really important. And by the way, there is another company called NAM. You know, there's JAM, there's AAA. There's a lot of them, and they all do provide, I think, great services for people. I was remiss in not mentioning some of them, but I think, you know, the culture that you bring out is very important. That's one of the things artificial intelligence can't do. It cannot tell you the human aspect of the litigation, and that's where you rely on us as lawyers to go in and find out. I'm a big believer, like you, in going into the town. You know, I attend court hearings. I'm there. I've been in court hearings in Mexico, Haiti, Dominican Republic. I've been in Prague and Romania, because it's only there that I get a sense of what's going on, you know. So I don't think that we should go strictly overboard and do artificial intelligence, because it's never going to replace that human element that we provide, right, Edgar? Even you, Jean-Rémi. I mean, you gotta look at the human element. There's no way you can let the machine make the decision, but it's an incredible tool just to get you the stuff you need to make the decision.
Absolutely. Yes, that's really how we see it as well at Jus Mundi, and also because most of us are former arbitration lawyers, so we know the reality of the process, and we know that the human aspect is so important and will stay so important. So, you know, my first client when I was a lawyer was Vietnam, and so I worked for the Vietnamese government during 7 years at the beginning of my career. And after 6 months of meeting with them, I couldn't understand certain of the decisions, but truly not, like why they would go in this direction, why for me it was not making sense. And so I decided to go there, to live there for a few months, to understand better the culture. And then at a point it became obvious that just there was some part of their culture, of their life, of how the government is organized, that I couldn't understand well from the outside. And that's the beauty of arbitration. That's why so many people love to work in this area. And this will stay the same for a long time.
We have another question. This is, I think, well, for both of you. Is it common for governments to agree to submit to dispute resolution to arbitrate? And I see a lot of this in Mexico. I see treaty and investor arbitrations. One of my friends just won a huge verdict against the Mexican government, but good for him, right? But what do you think about that? You know, Jean-Rémi and Edgar, do you see a lot more governments agreeing to arbitrate rather than litigate in court?
It's a very interesting discussion, Rudy, and again, it gives for another talk, but just very briefly. Very briefly, I mean, the governments, what you need to check, it's that the government is authorized by its own internal law to enter into arbitration agreements. So this is like the key. You need to go to either sometimes, for example, I mean, I can tell you right now from Mexico, I mean, you need to, that the state-owned entity, their own law authorizes them to go to arbitration. Otherwise, don't go to arbitration there. No? So I do see a tendency of governments to accept to arbitrate because it's understood that it fosters investment, transparency, some consistency internationally. But if you ask the experts in investment arbitration, they will tell you that the system is under review. No, they don't know how sustainable it's for the future. No, with countries getting out of investment treaties, very few. You know, but I mean, the investment arbitration is still very strong, I think. And I don't know. For me as a company, I would think of using investment arbitration. I think it's a good tool.
Well, some of my cases could conceivably be an investment dispute, you know, where we're defending. But you have to, and you have to make sure, when you say authorized, okay, you have to make sure that the company has properly ratified the treaty, because you will run into a situation where, the treaty's been ratified, but local law is going up against you and putting up obstacles, right? So that's the famous Metalclad case. It's a case in Mexico where they, under the NAFTA treaty, right? You're familiar with that case.
Yes, very.
You know, that we're building a plant in San Luis Potosí, and of course, federal and state and local government were opposing it, and Metalclad sued, saying it was basically a taking of the property, even though they never took title to it.
An indirect expropriation, they called it.
Yeah, indirect. Well, but there's a provision in the NAFTA treaty for that, you know, but it's not the typical that you would know under international law, you know, what it is.
I mean, we see in many countries like this tendency to use arbitration, for instance, in Brazil. So there is no investment arbitration as such because they don't sign treaties with arbitration clauses. But it's very often that public entities and the government itself sign commercial contracts with arbitration clauses. So there are many commercial arbitration clauses against public entities in Brazil. I think in Peru also, they have even some obligations for the government to use arbitration for some of their contracts. So it helps also to have some neutral decision-making. So it's very interesting because all over the world, we see arbitration used also as a good way to promote justice and the better resolution of a dispute settlement. If you look into India, for instance, the number of arbitration cases is exploding for the past 5 years. In China, it's even worse. In China, you have more than 100 arbitration centers that are active in the country currently. We just did our first partnership with one of them, with the Shanghai Arbitration Center recently. And arbitration is booming because people see it as a way to have an efficient, not necessarily cheap, but efficient dispute resolution system.
I've actually seen, I've heard lawyers say to me that in some countries, arbitration is more corrupt than going to the court, that you're better off going to court. That's a subject for another topic, okay?
Yeah,
a follow-up question is, in these cases, you also have access to the information to integrate into the database, right?
Yeah, it's one of the, I don't know the percentage like that, but many of our awards and judgments are about public entities. Yeah.
Okay, and we're about ready to wind up. It's been an hour. Any final words? And what we're going to do is we're going to close off on LinkedIn. We're going to close off, and we're going to have what Bill Maher does, you know, after hours. So if anybody who's a guest on Zoom would like to talk to, you know, Jean-Rémi and Edgar, you know, now's your time to do it. I have to say, Jean-Rémi, before we close, okay, I did a conversations with Rudy Rivera on the age gap diversity, okay? Now, I see a young guy who's raised a bunch of money, okay, to build a tech company that an old guy like me hadn't been able to do. You know what I'm saying? I see a young guy like Edgar, you know, taking the world by storm in arbitration. So there's a lot to be said for millennials being smart, the young people adding a lot to the world.
Yeah, but you know, it's also I told you like the switch from being a lawyer to be an entrepreneur was super complicated, and I've been very lucky to have a experienced entrepreneur who have been successful like 20 years ago, building their own companies, helping me to understand how to do it. Because it's great, you can raise money, you can go quick, but the quicker you want to go, the more chances you have to do mistakes, and the more you will pay a lot of money for your mistakes. So it's not that easy after.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
No, that's okay to make mistakes. Believe me, life isn't life if you don't make mistakes. Before we close, Jean-Rémi, you've got an arbitration builder clause. Can you send that link out to us?
Sorry?
You have an arbitration clause link. You texted me.
Arbitration clause link? No?
Yeah.
The model arbitration clauses, you mean?
Yeah.
But we have the model clauses in the rules of arbitration for each institution, but yeah.
Yeah, we can send that out to our guests down the road. So okay. I'll send that out via email. Okay. I'm the Zoom jockey here. You see, I'm running this thing from 3 monitors, you know, so in some ways I have a millennial mindset.
You are millennial, yeah.
So I am going to stop the live stream. Thank you, everyone on LinkedIn, for joining.
Yeah, thanks to all.
Stop the recording. And so I want to open it up to anybody who is on Zoom to see if they would like to talk or ask specific questions of our panelists. Now is your time. Just send me a text.
I see that there were also a point about from John. There are other ADA companies out there. So yeah, to be transparent, in arbitration, there are other companies that are providing information. But I think the big evolution that we are seeing, not only in arbitration with what we do, is that former companies tended to be publishers, doing books, doing reviews. And it was a very good way to get the information. It was the only way, actually. We had the invention of the printing machine to get information with indexes, with all of that. And now it's more creating a direct access to the data with technology or different kind of accesses. For instance, conflict checker, it's just you have the data, you identify a use case, and you create a tool for that. And probably there are many others. You mentioned a clause builder. Actually, it's one idea that we have also to build a clause builder that can you know, help you. You put some information and talk. Oh, you have your perfect clause that appears depending on your counterpart.
Recommending the institutions.
We have another comment says, please have other conversations with topics that could not be addressed today, because there are a lot of topics we could have talked about.
Yes.
True.
And then, and let us know was the other thing. So, yeah, so I think it was well received. We got some interesting, we got some great questions, great feedback. So, you know, Edgar, I teach international law at Washington University.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And I'll have you as a guest in one of my classes, because we will talk about arbitration. But what first thing I tell my students is I ask them, how many of you think you're smart? And they all raise their hand. And I say, I got news for you. Nobody cares. What they care about is, can you do the work and can you deliver the product? And the other thing I say to them, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but an international lawyer is a project manager, because there's no way, even just in litigation, there's no way you can know the litigation laws of every country you're going to work in. So you're a project manager constantly learning, and that's what it is. And you know enough to ask the right questions.
Agreed.
And you have to be smart enough to say, I don't know. And you have to be smart enough to get the right team together.
Absolutely. Especially the I don't know. Huh? It's like...
Yeah, I was thinking lawyers saying they don't know. That's pretty good.
Well, I think they respect more you saying, I don't know, than you trying to make up an answer, because, you know, a savvy CEO is going to know that you're doing the runaround, you know. You know, I just find it's easier to say, I don't know, but I'll find out, right?
Exactly.
but there's all kinds of tax consequences. There's, enforcement, labor issues. There's treaty issues. There's like, easily 10 different issues. And I often tell people that when you're going to negotiate a contract to go overseas, you better think of you're breaking up, because, everyone thinks they're on the honeymoon. This is going to be great. We're going to make a lot of money together. This joint venture, these guys are really great. And what happens? And why did we get into this contract and you can't get out of it? So what I've tried to do, my company is say, okay, let me know before you go in. Okay. And I'll tell you what the pitfalls are.
Yes. Same.
It's the same here, but they don't often consult us, Edgar. You know what I'm saying? Because the business unit says, oh, we're going to do this. This is great. Right.
The ones that I try to keep close to my attention are the guys from business development, not the BD guys, the ones that do all these new deals, international deals. I say, like, please integrate me and I'll tell you about the disputes. No?
Yeah, definitely. Are there any other questions from the group? We still have a bunch of people on. Edgar, are you in Mexico now?
I'm in Mexico, yes, but I came for the Christmas holidays to see my family. Yeah,
I am going to be in Mexico probably the third week in January.
No, that I will be in Geneva back then. Yeah.
You will be in Geneva back then? Yeah.
Yes. I go back to Geneva the first days of January.
So you're heading you're in Mexico. So where in Mexico City?
Mexico City, yes. In Cuauhtemoc, near the Angel of Independence.
Yeah. Okay. I stay at La Zona Rosa.
Yes, very, very close.
Near there. Yeah, that's where I stay. Jean-Rémi, when are you going to be in New York?
I will be back second week of January.
Okay.
And probably stay a few weeks. So we opened, our first office in New York a few months ago, and we are looking for new people, by the way. So I will probably come to do some hiring processes.
Well, I recommended somebody, but if that doesn't work out, there's other people I can recommend. So not a problem.
Sure. And I will go also to Houston. There is a good arbitration conference on energy arbitration, second week or third week of January in Houston.
Well, I think, I've noticed a lot of arbitration seminars. There was just one in Miami recently. There was one in, the one in Houston I heard about, but isn't there one in New York too?
Well, there are many. I can send you the link for this one in Houston, but there are so many arbitration conferences now all over the world.
I think there are more conferences than arbitration.
Yeah, you can go broke going to conferences. Trust me, you can really go broke going to conferences. And I used to sponsor conferences when I was with the business side, and it's not cheap. It's not cheap to set up the booth. Remember what happened to that company at the ACC annual meeting? None of their stuff came in, and they just had a card table with a box that they tore apart and said, net documents for $5 or something like that, or 5 cents. Will work for food. Well, sounds
super complicated. We did I don't know, maybe 30 conferences this year all over the world, sometimes organizing by ourselves, sometimes sponsoring. It's a lot of work.
So we got Bernabe that's on there, allowed him to talk. Hello, Bernabe. No, he doesn't want to talk. So. Okay, well, listen, thank you for doing this thing. It was a lot of fun. I think it was received well by our audience, and think of some topics for down the road, because I've got one this afternoon at 8 o'clock with a guy who wrote a book on negotiating in color, Edgar.
Okay.
Yeah, he wrote a book on different types of negotiators, different personality styles.
Nice. Can you send me the link?
Yeah, I'll send you the link. Yeah. Sounds good. Everybody take it easy. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Huh?
See you soon somewhere. I don't know where.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm like a bad penny. I can show up any place.